And we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you guys for tuning in. I got a special guest right here. I got AK Dozanti. Did I pronounce that correctly?
You got it.
Perfect.
First try.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about. That's why I love this platform. Thank you guys for tuning in. AK, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So I am a first responder wellness coach and specialist, speaker, author, coach. But before all of that, I started my law enforcement career at just 19, doing some undercover online stuff while I was getting my undergrad. Then I jumped right into not right into road patrol, worked my way up to road patrol. Did the bulk of my career on road patrol afternoon shift. Loved it. It was great until I was in 2015 Officer of the Year. Went from Officer of the Year to a very crispy burnout. And at that point, I pivoted, became a criminal court victim advocate, got my master's degree, and a whole bunch of other stuff transpired. And in 2021, I formed Lifesaver Wellness and started doing what I'm doing now.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for the rundown of that. I appreciate that. I know coming into law enforcement and coming in at a young age, I remember as well, I was thrown out there in the undercover capacity, and it was fun. It was, to get it out early was a good thing. I'm pretty sure it was for you. And then to come into the point where it's like, I don't know what's going on. And like, it's hard to get up and go to work or find motivation, or am I making a difference? And I think you just explained that in your book, Beat the Burnout here. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you get your copy if you didn't get yours. But can you tell us what gave you the motivation to actually want to become a published author and publish Beat the Burnout?
Yeah, so I, on a whim, got a TikTok account. I didn't think it was going to go anywhere. I didn't put too much stock in it. And within the first few months, it blew up. And I don't have a huge following, but I've got about 60,000 people on there. And I was very often getting questions about my background and what I do and how I became to do what I do, because people were like, this is kind of cool because you're not a clinician, but you have this background, and then you have all these other certifications and education. And so ultimately that was kind of what led me to just put it all in one place. And I have so much, and this is, I'm not saying this in a vain way, but I have so much knowledge rattling around in my brain that I was like, I have to get this out in a way that anybody can access it, right? Like, it's, very affordable. If you can read, we're good. And an Audible version is coming soon too. So if you have ears that listen, then we're good on that front too. So I think it was just ultimately out of necessity and out of people needing the information that I have.
Gotcha. So basically, if someone doesn't have the book or the Audible that's going to be coming out, there's limited excuses on why they should be able to get the information, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and honestly, I put a ton of information out for free on socials. I'm constantly just dropping little tidbits, and I've had people say that, they've binge watched a lot of my stuff, and they've learned a lot. So that's awesome. That the power of social media, right?
Yeah, it touches everyone somewhere nationally and globally. But you talk about 2015 was a pivotal year for you. I know in your book you talk about how you've reached the high point for law enforcement by becoming Officer of the Year. Is that correct?
Yep.
And then at the same time, you're taking a trip to Nashville, and then you're excited to go there. It's a vacation you're looking forward to, but then you become sick, and you try and make the best of it. But it kind of unfolds. It explains how the mindset, how the body receives the burnout, the trauma, whatever may come from it. Can you delve into that a little bit?
Yeah. So ultimately, there was a couple of years of buildup before the break, I guess you could call it.
Right.
And it's a slow burn. It's a slow buildup. Burnout's very sneaky. So it had built up to the point where I was unaware of what was going on, but I had severe depression. I had PTSD, what I later found out was adrenal fatigue and suicidal ideation.
Wow.
And all of that stuff was going on behind the scenes, even as I was getting Officer of the Year. So I was just in this constant battle of being one person at work and performing, and being a whole other person when I went home at night. And I took this trip on a whim with my now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, and we were very excited. I came down with a little bit of a cold, wasn't a terrible thing, but it did turn into a sinus infection. But it was the drive home where I just, at the mere thought of going back to work the next day, not even the next morning, I was on afternoon shift. So just at the mere thought of, 24 hours from now, I'm going to be back in uniform.
Yeah.
For some reason, that completely overtook my whole brain and body, and I had my first ever panic attack. And it just completely consumed me, and I didn't recognize it for what it was at the time. And I was so embarrassed, and I remember apologizing to my now husband and being like, I'm so sorry, I have no idea what's happening. And then the next day I went to the doctor for my sinus infection, and I just barely kind of scratched the surface of what was going on. And kind of just said, I'm having some anxieties, and it didn't go too deep into all of the suicidal ideation and all that, because I didn't want to lose my job, right? Yeah. And so she wrote me a prescription and said, take 2 weeks off. And that was it. There was no follow-up. She said, go find a counselor. Wow. So I was like, cool. So I called off for that day and wasn't sure what was going to transpire, but ultimately ended up ripping up the prescription, and a couple days later wrote my resignation.
Wow.
Full-time law enforcement. Yeah.
Wow. And that's a big transition. It's shocking, but congratulations to you for not going down the total slippery slope of trauma and panic attacks and things that come from, and then depression and all the intrusive thoughts that come with depression. So congratulations to you on making the pivot. What would you share to current law enforcement officers that, were eager to get the job? They're working their specialty, whether it's investigations, narcotics, SWAT, whatever special units they may be on, or just even if it's just patrol, and then they hit that speed bump as well, and they're like, I can't share this with the peers, I can't share this with the sergeant or my coworkers, because I don't want to be stigmatized, for one. For two, I can get over it. It's just a slump. I can get through this. Everyone has some sort of setbacks, and no matter whatever they're doing in their life.
Yeah. Well, and that's not to say that it might not be just a slump, because we have them. I mean, that's normal. Like, so yeah. Don't panic if you are just in a slump. But if that slump has been for the last 4 months, we might need to start thinking about managing things in a different way. And I think the biggest thing is to kind of take an inventory of what your habits and behaviors are. And this is not to shame you and say you're doing anything wrong, but kind of take a look at, like, am I moving my body? Am I eating properly? Is my mindset in the sewer? Who am I surrounding myself with? What's their mindset? Simple things to start there, but honestly, go to a therapist. It's not, find a culturally competent therapist that works with first responders and law enforcement. There are a lot of databases out there now. The FOP has a database for just about every state. And you don't have to report that to your job. Right. There's HIPAA laws. So you don't have to. I mean, everybody thinks that, like, oh my gosh, they're all in cahoots together and they're going to find out everything I say. That's not the case. So definitely start looking at managing controlling the controllables, the things that you do have with control over, and then find just one lifeline outside of yourself, somebody to share that with, because sometimes even just saying it out loud is a huge relief, and then you can go, oh, okay, it actually doesn't sound that bad when I say it out loud. When we're trying to contain it all, hold it all in, it hits a little different. Yeah,
it does. Bottling it up is just like shaking up a soda can or a soda bottle and keeping the top on, and eventually it's going to explode. As opposed to if you slowly turn it and release it, it'll fizz up a little bit, but then it'll calm again. So yeah, exactly.
Well, and to that fact, sometimes we are so immersed in it, we can't read the label from inside the bottle. So we need somebody outside of us to reflect back to us like, hey, you have changed. There's some things going on with you, and I care about you enough to bring that to the forefront.
Yeah. I know. I remember. It reminds me of being in the academy, and one of the instructors said, you're going to be involved in this new life. You're going to be engulfed in it. You'll have a new circle of friends. You'll have the thin blue line and all the phrases that they throw, and it was just very true. But they always said, keep your circle of influence. Make sure you maintain friendship that's not law enforcement related as well. So therefore, you have some sort of grounding. You still are not totally alienated from quote unquote normal people or the public or whatever. And then once you have those moments, at least for me, I know there were points in time when I'm like, I love these guys, but certain things I can't talk about. I'm not going to disclose this. It was nice to have. I had engineer friends, I had construction worker friends that I could just talk to one-on-one, sitting down, go out for Monday Night Football and get some wings and then have a discussion as well. And there was no judgment, and they don't know the full culture. So their ears were kind of open because they were somewhat interested in the culture. But secondly, they were interested because they were still a friend.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I'm glad that they told you that, because, we talk about the brotherhood and all that stuff. And then, sometimes just the nature of our work, we can't divulge too much information. And so that kind of forces us to isolate a little bit. But absolutely making sure you have, you get out of the echo chamber, you have connections outside of it, because ultimately at some point, your career is going to end. Whether it's a wonderful retirement with a party and all the things, or if it's medical or you choose to leave, whatever the case is, at some point it's going to end. And we hope that those relationships that we build within it will carry over. But oftentimes, more often than not, I find that they fizzle out because the proximity isn't there. And that's okay, but that's why you need this, this other realm. And some of that just provides you a sense of normalcy too, because cops, we get together, we talk, we have brash conversations, we have dark humor. So giving you some kind of sense of normalcy to just talk about the grandkids or whatever the case is great. And I don't know why I said grandkids, because my kids are still toddlers, but but you know what I'm saying, it gives
exactly
kind of,
I understand.
Some basic normal conversation.
Yeah where we don't have to be so cynical with each other. We can actually let me stop going down. I don't have to be this blunt with this conversation. I can pull it back a little bit.
100%. Yeah, it's refreshing.
Exactly. So I wanted to talk about something that resonated with me in the book, and for those who haven't read it yet, it's on page 23. It's the 12 stages of burnout, and right here, and I'll read them off for those who make sure you guys get the book too. But it's number 1, compulsive ambition; 2, working harder; neglecting needs; avoiding conflict; revisiting values; denying problems; withdrawal; concerning others; depersonalization; sense of emptiness; depression; and final stage of burnout, number 12. Exactly. Of those 12, not trying to go through one by one, I just wanted to make sure that they were listed. Which one do you think is the most challenging?
I think the displacement of conflict. So basically, when you start saying that all of my problems are because of an external factor or because somebody else did something, so it puts us in a position where we're reactive and not proactive. So at that point, the burnout has already started to set in because you've already started to neglect your own needs. But it really starts to sneak in and creep into your mindset and the way you're seeing the world. And you're starting to put the blame outside of yourself. And I'm not saying you need to shame yourself, but what that does is that puts the control and the onus on external factors. But when you have the ability to say, you know what, this is my responsibility and I have a lot of things in my life that I can control, that's when you start to take your power back. But what happens instead, if we don't see it that way, we start to move our life around the burnout and then it just snowballs from there. And so I think that's probably the biggest like pivot point. But something to note that I think is super important about those 12 stages is most people don't realize is the 12th stage is not wanting to be in your own life anymore. And this is why I'm so passionate about burnout, is because burnout prevention truly is suicide prevention. And we know that in these jobs, in these occupations, we're losing more to suicide than in the line of duty. And so I just wanted to make a note about that burnout is important, because it's a slippery slope and we often ignore it, and it's become super normalized. And I want to catch people in that middle ground before they get to that 12th stage.
Exactly. I like that. I know I don't have the stats. I'm sorry. I don't have the stats available right now. I know we talked about it on a few past live, probably about a year ago. On, of course, first responders are we're taking ourselves out. We're our own killers. We're the ones who don't seek the help because we're the fixers. And I forget, it was a high percentage that it was from 2023 to 2024 of us on self-deletion. Say that just so that doesn't get copywritten on the platform. Sure. But it was rising for 2023 to 2024, and each year it seems like it goes higher and higher, a smaller percentage more, as opposed to going down. At least from the last time I looked, I don't know what 2025 is right now or where we're at, but hopefully we're learning more. Hopefully we're not taking ourselves out more. But again, it does cover that, because it's a slow burn process. It's like a candle. You don't even know sometimes that it's being lit until it's about halfway through, and you're kind of like drowning in everything that's going on.
Yeah. And I always like to bring that to the forefront, because it is it's a very serious topic, but we talk about burnout like, oh, well, everybody's burned out. Well, that's not good. That's why we're losing people, so yeah.
So would you say, would I be wrong in saying that some things, that if we shift the blame and we put it externally on some things, would that be like if we pull over a speeder, they're running late for work and they don't have their driver's license on them, but immediately they start putting the blame on us? You're going to make me late for work. Now I'm not going to be able to pay my electric bill because this ticket you're given, and we're just doing our job, and therefore they're not being accountable for the actions. They were going 20 miles over the speed and their driver's license may be suspended. None of that was any of our fault. However, we get that blame for it. Would that be something similar, or is that something off key?
No, I completely agree. And I think that it's up to us to look internally at what habits and behaviors and actions and thoughts are we, contributing to that are making this problem worse. Oftentimes, we're, like I said, not fueling our body properly, or, surrounding ourselves with the wrong people. And in those instances, when you feel terrible, you start to, it's hard to look at yourself and say, what am I doing that's contributing to this? So absolutely, I think that's a great analogy.
All right, perfect. So I know there's many different types of burnout per se, and many different stimulations. It affects us differently in law enforcement or first responders. Have you seen it, or from your experience, is there a different style of burnout, at least for first responders, that you may see more prevalent than there is with maybe those working in the private sector or white collar jobs or non-law enforcement employees?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the same main factors. It's the mental, physical, emotional exhaustion, the cynicism, and that, sarcasm, and just, bad attitude. But really what that is it's not allowing yourself to see any hope for the future. And then the third one is just feeling like you're not making a difference. You're not making an impact anymore. And I think that the way that it shows up often for first responders, for law enforcement, is we tend to kind of thrive on that adrenaline. And so it's all hidden behind high performance. And so we have the adrenaline, and then we just pile more caffeine on top of it. And then we don't eat as much as we should, and we don't exercise like we need to. And we just become on autopilot. So we get stuck in that on mode while we're working. And then oftentimes what what I hear, I've talked to thousands of first responders about this. You come home and it's like you're a totally different person. You can't engage. You turn into the, grizzly bear in the lazy boy chair. And what I tend to see in other occupations, and I haven't done a whole lot of focus on other occupations. So what I tend to see though is a little bit more withdrawal, lower productivity kind of situation. So it's like they kind of come on the low end, whereas we just drive harder into it. So I think those factors, that's kind of how it shows up. But also I think because of the nature of being like in a trauma-rich environment, we have the high stress, which in Greek, the word stress is strictus, which means a tightening or a narrowing. So we're narrowing and tightening our own capacity, but trauma is a nervous system overwhelm. So we're overwhelming an already restricted nervous system.
Wow.
And so that, I think, is the biggest difference for first responders. But a lot of times we just don't recognize it because we also value stoicism. And so we don't speak up until we're already in a crisis.
Yeah.
That was a really long-winded answer, but
no, that was great. It got me thinking. I actually want to look into it a little bit more. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So therefore, if a first responder is in crisis, but not immediate crisis, and they've sought out a peer officer, peer or a therapist or some sort of counseling, what kind of successful aftercares have you seen?
Staying in the work, staying in the, self-care kind of tactics and behaviors, making sure you have consistency. The biggest thing in all of the aftercare is the consistency and the frequency. For example, journaling is super effective, but not if you only do it 3 times. Going to the gym, exercising, super effective, not if you only do it for a week. So it's kind of mastering these ordinary things so that we can then move to the extraordinary. But maintaining those social networks, sleep hygiene is absolutely huge. We're starting to talk more about it and starting to talk enough about it, but it's something that's so overlooked and undervalued. Our brains and our bodies don't function right if we're not getting enough sleep. Right. And a big cultural thing is to have a little nightcap, drink a little booze before we go to sleep. Kind of helps you wind down for the night. But actually what it's doing is it's not allowing you to get into REM sleep, which is where your brain actually recovers and kind of goes through a car wash to get rid of the debris from the day. And not only that, it spikes your blood sugar in the middle of the night. And when that blood sugar drops, you don't know it because you're asleep, but it's actually sending you into a stress response and releasing cortisol while you're sleeping.
Wow.
And so these are things we don't know. We don't talk about it enough. So, a nightcap might help you fall asleep, but it's actually prohibiting you from getting the quality of sleep that you need. So really, it's just maintaining a wholesome life, making sure that you're taking care of yourself and, cultivating these connections around you. That's honestly the best aftercare.
Perfect. It reminds me, again, not trying to go back to the academy. They say, yeah, make sure you get enough sleep. And you're like, of course I'm going to get enough sleep. I'm going to be exhausted by the end of the day. That'll be easy. And then working a few years, working shift work, whether it's day shift, night shift, rotational, whatever it may be, you get called in for overtime, you get called in for court, you get called in for an emergency that happens. After a while, things get interrupted, then you try and make up for the time that you missed during other times, and it's a domino effect, and you miss out on sleep. And it gets to the point where I remember, for me, again, going back to myself, working 12 hours, 7 to 7 overnight, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. And then my kids would have a baseball game or a football game the next day, and it would be going into my days off. So I'm like, okay, I can get home. I'll be home at least by 8. I can shower. I can power down from 8 to 11. I can get 3 hours of sleep, and then I'll just force myself to get up. And I don't want to miss of course, the game. games and I don't want to lose out on a day because this is part of my weekend. And if I sleep all day, the next thing you know, I'll be up all night and no one's going to be up. And it domino effect. So I remember thriving off 3 hours of sleep and going to games and actually remembering events, but a lot of things are a big blur as well because I didn't know I was deprived and I was in a mental fog. I always felt tired, no matter if I was had the caffeine or not.
Yeah. And so many, I think, a lot of people, a lot of people tend to start the career in their early 20s and then they get about 5 to 7 years in and they get married and they start having kids. So you're having this point of where you're already getting a little bit cynical, you're burning out a little bit. Then you have kids and then your sleep tanks because children. And so that just adds to it, right? And so it's not always just the job. A lot of it is the whole situation, your whole experience. And that's why they tell us to just compartmentalize. And keep work at home and home. But when you're at home, there's things that you need to be doing so that you can be at your peak performance at work. And we don't want to have to, put more time and equity into the job, but your survival depends on it. And I'm not just talking about, the survival of the job and the threats on the street. Your survival with yourself depends on it. And you're not going to magically stumble upon that time. You have to create it. You have to carve it out and make it a priority.
Gotcha. And so if any of the listeners now have never heard of you or haven't read the book at all, are there any key points that you would like for them to take away after listening to our conversation?
You can still be elite at what you do without destroying yourself in the process. High functioning burnout is still burnout. And that's, I think, the hardest part for us to recognize, especially in these jobs, because you're like, well, I still show up every day. I'm still doing a kick-ass job, but you could be doing great at your job. And, your home life is suffering, your internal landscape is suffering, everything else is just falling apart. So it drives you further into, let me just work some more overtime. Let me just spend some more time here because that feels good. Don't neglect your home life. Don't neglect your self-care. And you can still manage all of these things. You just have to be super intentional about it.
Right. It goes back to, again, discipline, and regimented again. Yeah. Do the boring things consistently, and then they become a habit. And next thing you know, you're actually doing what you're supposed to be doing, kind of on autopilot.
Yeah. The things that you fail to manage, you will lose, whether it's your health, your relationship, your finances, whatever it is. So do your best to be really intentional and manage those things, and you'll be able to thrive in all aspects. Absolutely. And again, for those who are watching for the first time, if they wanted to order a copy of the book and or learn more about you or hear some of your teachings or anything like that, can you tell us how we could connect with you or get those listen to you on social media or obtain a copy of the book? Sure. Yeah. So the book is on Amazon or any place books are sold. But you can also get signed copies at akdozanti.com. That is probably the best place to find all of my stuff. Everything is linked up there. All my socials are linked up there. But any place, as far as I know, I'm the only AK Dozanti around. So just Google me. You'll be able to see, podcast episodes, different, things that I've done in the last 3 or 4 years. And of course, akdozanti.com is probably the best place to find all those things.
Perfect. I'll make sure that is in the comments section and in the description box for this interview. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Through the course of conversation, I may have forgot to ask you a question, or I may have jogged your memory on something. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us right now? The floor is yours.
I would just say, make sure that you're not trying to go through this life alone. Isolation is a killer, and the biggest indicator of how you're going to bounce back after a critical incident is the support system you have before that critical incident happens. So be intentional, build those support systems, You don't have to be incredibly vulnerable and spill your guts every single time you talk to somebody, but have at least a couple of people that you can confide in and trust, and open yourselves up to that, because we're not meant to go through this life alone. You're never alone.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. That was very, very important. Sometimes I think we all know that, most of us know that, but it's good to hear, and it's a good reminder again. So thank you for sharing that again. AK, it was a pleasure to have you on the show. I don't want to monopolize your time too much. You gave tremendous information. I had a tremendous conversation with you. Thank you for making yourself available. And we're gonna drive on, and hopefully someone, if the right person or if someone brand new hears this information and it has a positive effect on them.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I really appreciate you and the work you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we will go ahead and move on to the next portion of the show. You guys take care.